Hello and welcome to Startup Life Live. I'm your host, Ande, Lyons, startup founder coach, podcast host, and co-host of a popular monthly pitch event called Founders Live Boston. And with 4 businesses to my credit, I know from personal experience what startup founders are going through right now, before the coronavirus and now. And I just want to say, how are you all doing? Are you staying home? Are you staying safe? Are you staying healthy? So back to my having 4 businesses and my understanding what founders are going through right now. You see, I had unforeseeable circumstances that were completely out of my control, and they destroyed 2 of my businesses. And I have to say, founders, it's a horrible experience. And my heart goes out to everyone who is struggling right now to keep their businesses open. I'm saying a little prayer. But here's also what I know to be true. Founders are meant to be founders. You are meant to bring your full expression to the world. And as a business owner and as who you be in the world. So founders do hard things every single day. So now you're stepping into another level of hard, but you've been building your resiliency and your tenacious muscles. And while no one is ever prepared for the circumstances we find ourselves in today, we can find ways to stick together, right? To navigate these tumultuous and really difficult times, holding hands virtually, hugging virtually, and exploring strategies and solutions to weather this storm. So, audience, this is a live show. Let's keep the human connection going and find ways to innovate and collaborate together. Your participation is key during this episode of Startup Life Live. So please pop your questions and comments into the comment threads. We'll showcase as many as possible on the screen. Let me show you an example. Okay, here we go. Hey, Vicki, how are you? That's what it's going to look like when you pop one of your questions up, and we're going to bring it up. We're going to give a shout out to you and your business. This is also a terrific time amongst yourselves to chat, to build relationships, to expand your network, to collaborate and celebrate. I've met so many wonderful folks in the comment threads during a live show and on Twitter chats. So have fun. And heartfelt thanks for joining me on this new first inaugural voyage of a live series. And to help me launch, I couldn't think of anybody better to bring on as a guest than my dear online friend, Shannon Hernandez. And he is going to share his best tips, tools, and resources for launching a podcast. And I got to tell you, I get questions all the time about podcasting, which I've been doing since I was 2012. So while we're staying at home, I thought, let's grab my favorite podcast host and get all your questions answered. Does it sound like fun? Shannon has been instrumental in my own success as a podcast video host, and I know that you will love his view of the world as much as I do. Let me bring him into the picture here, everybody. Please meet the so delicious Shannon Hernandez. Thank you for joining me, Shannon.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me for your first inaugural live episode. This is kind of an honor.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. And I've just got to glow on you for a minute, okay?
Okay.
Because viewers, I became a devoted fan of Shannon and his remarkable work in the world 6 years ago. And I had a live video show on Google Hangouts. And hello to all our friends who used to play together on Google Hangouts. Shannon has helped many of us podcasters and broadcasters to succeed in creating compelling content. And you'll see he has this warm, welcoming ability to share his deep knowledge and love of audio and video content creation with folks, which is why he has built a huge following everywhere he goes. But I want to share something that Shannon said in a recent video that he just put up on his popular YouTube channel. And this is his advice. Podcasting during a pandemic is more important than you think. Folks need inspiration and they need information. It's the perfect time to be the light that people are looking for so you can lead them to a better life on the other side of the pandemic. How wonderful is that? Thank you, Shannon.
You're welcome. Thank you. That was very kind of you.
Oh, hey, listen, I want to say hello to a dear friend of mine, Mr. Weisblatt. He is an independent film producer, director, maker, and an amazing content creator. I'm so glad you're here.
Great. Hi, Aaron.
So we're going to get started. We're going to start talking about questions and what we need to know for launching a podcast. But Shannon, can you just take us on a little bit of a journey, because you began your career in radio almost 20 years ago, right? So if you could share with viewers a little bit about your background and where are you hailing from today?
Yeah, so I am in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been here in my home all day, but I've been in Phoenix for it's been pretty much since I came to college at ASU, Arizona State University. And when I graduated college, I started working at a company called 93.3 KDKB. It was a radio station out here. And I just started doing promotions. Fast forward about a year. You aren't a real radio person unless you have been fired in radio. So I was fired a year later. And I got a job about a month after that firing and started working for 98 KUPD FM. It's a rock station. It's the premier rock station here in Phoenix. And during that time, I've learned so much. In fact, as I was thinking about it earlier, as I was over here meal prepping, I was thinking about my time doing radio and thinking, well, could I have started like my own side hustle or business during that time? And I think I came up with the answer of maybe, possibly not, because I needed to really kind of hone my skills. And at the time when podcasting was brand new, it was still kind of like how we are experiencing everything going on in this pandemic. We're just kind of taking it day by day. And so that's how podcasting was. You kind of took it day by day. And there was a group of podcasters out there that really were just sharing audio files back and forth with each other. That's all it was. And then all of a sudden, you had Apple Pod, or it was back then iTunes, and you had the iPod come out and people were able to listen to these shows. So those who got in on podcasting way ahead of the game, they really were able to capitalize and start growing their audience because there wasn't the competition that is out there now. So as I fast forwarded and I started realizing that more podcasters were creating programs that were very similar to radio, I thought, well, wait, I've been doing this for 20 years. Back then I've been doing it for 16 years. I should be able to teach these people how it works in radio and how it can translate into, podcasting as well. And not just podcasting is saying like, I'm the all knowing God of radio and podcasting, but I also wanted to take the skills that I was learning from podcasting and implement them into radio. So I believe that there is a flow that goes back and forth with everything. You can learn something from everything. I wouldn't say consequently, but as a result, I have been able to help the radio station in developing content and developing podcasts, and I've been able to leverage what I have learned online and use it for the radio station and vice versa. So now, for the past, I would say probably 6 years since you and I have known each other, I have really jumped in and I focused on podcasting, and I've just focused solely on podcasting. But podcasting, it has many different elements, and a lot of those elements are what happens and what works within the actual platforms themselves. These aren't rules that I'm making up. They're rules that are according to the platform, say Google or YouTube or Facebook or Instagram. Yeah. So I don't make those rules up. I just share them.
And you go deep when you talk about podcasting. And folks, I'll pop into the comment threads the link to follow Shannon on his YouTube channel. He has over 7,000 subscribers, gets thousands of views on his episodes because he brings such valuable information. Of course, I'm just not envious, but I just appreciate the fact that he speaks so well extemporaneously like that, and I know that probably took years to develop as a DJ. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I always have had the gift of gab. So, I just have learned how to, develop a conversation by thinking 4 or 5 steps ahead of what I want to say, learning how to pace myself. not being too worried about ums and uhs like most podcasters are. They're terrified of umming and uhing too much. But when you watch people like Stephen Colbert or Jimmy Fallon, they're umming and uhing constantly. So it's a misconception that I think a lot of podcasters, I don't know where that came from, but it's a big misconception. And that's something that I actually talked about in one of my videos was, there's a difference between speaking, as you would say, extemporaneously versus reading something and making it sound like it's an audiobook. And there are podcasts out there that are storytelling podcasts that do require that type of skill where you're not umming and uhing. And I could go further and further and further down the line.
You can't compare yourself to folks out there to
Sure.
Guy Raz, a beautifully edited podcast, okay, and how I built it. You're going to get out there, you're going to share your information. We're going to talk a lot about that. But what's one of the best and most favorite interviews you've done with your podcast? Because you had a fun podcast interviewing some great heavy metal rock.
Yeah, I did one about a year ago called Swing Shift Side Hustle, and it was an experiment with the radio station because they were still trying to figure out podcasting, and I told them, well, look, I'll do a podcast. I just need you guys to get me the guests. And so we started getting the guests, and I interviewed people from Greta Van Fleet, a band called Five Finger Death Punch. You might like Greta Van Fleet. They sound like Led Zeppelin.
I love Greta Van Fleet.
Yeah.
I follow them on Twitter everywhere they go.
Right. And they are just the greatest guys ever. They're hilarious. They're funny. They're like guys who have just they were thrown back from the 70s and 60s, and you just think to yourself like, wow, these guys really, really kind of embodied that, and the way they talk about their hometown, you think that they're coming from another time. That was a really fun interview. I mean, I've interviewed many, many different rock stars within the genre itself. And we've become friends. And so it makes the process of actually doing the interview a lot easier because I'm not necessarily scripting or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I am writing down, say, a list of like 10 to 15 questions in case I do get stuck. But for the most part, I try to tap into the empathetic side of the person. And I think what's interesting with most musicians and rock stars and anyone who's in the music industry is that when they get interviewed by me, they always go like, wow, that's a totally different interview than what I was expecting, because most interviews are like, tell us about the album, tell us about the tour, tell us about the rock star lifestyle. Whereas I go deeper and I ask them, okay, here's what I heard in this lyric. Explain to me, walk me through the process. And I have them describe and walk me through processes. So that's something that I think that most podcasters can do. They can really dive into that empathetic or ask someone to really explain a topic, explain a thought that they saw online, and likely that thought that was written online can be expanded upon, and it's expound. It can go so far within a podcast that you get so much great content out of it.
I know that, and this is where we're going to dive into the beauty of podcasting, because there are a lot of mechanics as far as podcasting goes that we want to cover, the mic, sound, audio, all these things, pesky details. But I want you to first talk about why podcasting can be an ideal tactic for a startup founder, a business owner, small business owner, solopreneur. Why is this an important addition to their marketing mix?
Yeah, this can be many different parts of that mix. And I have seen it in many different forms. Some, let's say small businesses, they just create the podcast so they can get eyes on their brand. Mm-hmm. And it's a total brand play. That's all it is. It's just a strict brand play. You take someone like, or you take a brand like Trader Joe's, and their podcast isn't an interview podcast. It's kind of like a storytelling podcast, and you get to learn a little bit more about.
I didn't know Trader Joe's had a podcast. Did anybody else know that they just had a podcast? No.
Yeah, they make these really cool podcasts where they talk about how the produce comes from the farm to the supermarket and the process that goes into that. So they're more into the storytelling, and it's more of a brand play. But then you get a lot with the typical entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, where they do it and they want to use it to create leads and they want to provide that value. That's something that I do with my YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. I do it so that I can create leads. I can find people who are truly interested in learning about the value or learning more about how to become a podcaster, or I guess a broadcaster. And I think the one of the things that, I could say anyone really who wants to start a podcast who isn't comfortable with starting a podcast, I think the one thing that they're really afraid of is the sound of their voice. And they don't like the way their voice sounds. And that's the most common thing that shows up on my YouTube channel. It's the most common comment, actually, whereas like, I don't like the sound of my voice. I feel like I sound like a little elf or whatever. And I think it's my, I guess, personal duty and responsibility to encourage these people and say, you cannot let that thing hold you back, because you were given the gift of who you are and you have to share that with the world. So why not share it with the world?
I love that. I just want to stop for a second because Vicky had a great comment regarding Trader Joe's. Great idea with storytelling for them. This is why it's so important. Thanks, Vicky, for that. This is why it's so important, podcasting, to bring it into your mix, especially, I mean, Trader Joe's, of course, is huge. But for those of us who want to increase our brand awareness, who want to create content. And the reason I podcast is, of course, to increase brand awareness. It gives me great content. I can set it up consistently. I'd be terrible. I would fail miserably if I had to do a blog post. And I interview people that I find out in the world who have a story to share. And of course, in my world, it's startup stories, but I get to hear them as a founder as to who they are. And then I get to hear about their business model, because in my podcast, Startup Live Show, it's all about the business model. How did they get in, become a founder? How did they prove their value prop? Why are they using that business model? All these really important features. And I get to be a better founder coach. And then I get introduced to their tribe as well.
Right.
And so, you can do so many different things with a podcast, but I think what Shannon said too is that you have something to say. There are stories to be told. And I will tell you all flat out, when I first launched my first podcast back in 2012, I had a producer. I had 2 guests that I interviewed for an hour once a week, and my knees were shaking and I was so nervous for 52 weeks in a row. And then, I got the hang of it and hopped onto Blog Talk Radio and just did my own thing. But it's still scary. It's still scary to come on here live.
Yeah.
And, so you don't see me. I'm not as amazing as Shannon is in being able to speak extemporaneously. I have to have the prompts of the script. What am I saying? I could lose my thought. Shiny white object was there. But I love your point about why podcasting can be a great addition to someone's marketing mix and provide so many ways of just grabbing content. And one of the great things that you showed us how to do on your YouTube channel, Shannon, and I'll have the link for everybody, is how to create audiograms. Oh my gosh.
Right. Yeah. Audiograms.
Those are great.
Yeah.
So you brought up the voice, folks. I mean, Vicky just said in the in the audience here, she still doesn't like to listen to hers. Vicky, I love your voice in your podcast. You're amazing. But I understand we all have our quirks and our feelings of self-conscious, feelings. But let's get down to someone's going to say, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to do this. Where do I begin? What kind of mic do you need? What kind of, what do I need? How do I get started? And I mean, I've seen people, Shannon, go out and spend thousands of dollars creating this great studio, and they make it 8 episodes and that's it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way. It can be a very simple purchase. So let's start. Where do you want to start? You want to start with the mic? Where do you want to start?
I mean, we can start in a very simple fashion. Just because of where we are and the state of the world we are in today, unless you're like someone like me who's ready to buy like a $300, $400 microphone, that's probably not going to be you, right? You're probably thinking, well, what will be the most cost effective and still give me results? And so let's start from the very bottom. I mean, you can use something as simple as your phone, and it's all going to depend on, the space that is on your phone. So whether you're using an Android device or whether you're using an iPhone, if you're going to do something like a solo podcast, you can record directly into your phone, and that will suffice. I've done interviews with a friend of mine. His name is Phil Labonte. He's actually from your area over there in Boston.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he works in he's in a rock band out there. And so I interviewed him at one of our festivals, and the phone sounded great. And it was just me holding the phone and just going back and forth like I was holding a microphone. So you could use that if you're doing something in person, since we are in a bit of a different time now and social distancing and not being, we have to do this. Now we have to upgrade. So that's just an idea for something for you for later down the line to think, okay, I can still do this from my phone. Now we take the next step. And so let's say we take the next step would be you could use either Anchor or Castbox. Now, I'm gonna say, like, I'm not a hater. I'm not hating on Anchor, but I'm not a big fan of Anchor and Anchor.fm. It is a hosting platform. It is, a lot of people use it, but I get more complaints. I have one video up on my YouTube channel that gets a ton of people who just they're sending their grievances about the platform. And even though I think they are doing a great job of making the platform better, like allowing you that opportunity to bring people in and have a co-hosting formula where there's someone else is talking on their phone, you can still do that. As a long-term strategy and game, I just don't see Anchor as being that for you. And then so we go to the next step. You could use a service called Castbox. Castbox is a free service that you can use, and you can go actually do a live podcast from their app, which is very, very cool. I have played with it. It is something that I am thinking about doing and creating, just a side podcast and bringing people in. You can bring guests in it and callers in, so people can call in, and then of course they can ask you a question. Then you can kick them out, and then you can answer that question. So it's very similar to how radio is concerned, and so you can use that application. Now, as far as microphones are concerned, let's talk about the microphones.
Can I just put in about microphone for me personally? So I have what you see right here, what Shannon's using, and you plug it in. You've got to have a headset with that. It's a Blue Yeti. But here's my problem, Shannon.
What's that?
I just, in the podcast, I'm like, da, 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 and I'm over here and keeping my lips glued so that, and you can hear my voice go in and out, in and out.
Yeah.
So I actually just go with a simple, I think it's like $31 on Amazon, USB Logitech headset.
Yeah.
Is it ideal? No. And someday maybe I'll get all fancy schmancy, but it works for me as far as you're going to hear everything I say.
Yeah. Well, and the reason why I use the Blue Yeti microphone is because, and this is something that I think not too many people realize, the reason why we wear headphones in radio is so that we can monitor the distance between ourselves and the microphone. So that's the whole reason. And of course, to eliminate the feedback as well. So
what do you get? Do you know when you've gotten too far away from the mic when you have a headset on?
Oh yeah. Like you just know how far you get. Like you can tell that I've stepped away, and I can tell in my headset that I'm further away. And so you just learn to get further away or closer to the microphone.
I just learned a new tip. Thank you, Shannon.
So if you're looking for that quality sound, you can still use that. You can still monitor yourself and turn the volume up on this particular microphone and hear yourself. My setup, my rig in my bedroom, it allows me to hear myself even better. So, that's going to be an option for you. You could have to figure it out for yourself. So you could get a Blue Yeti microphone and use this. There's another microphone called the ATR 2100.
And I like that one. Now the Blue Yeti is about $125.
It varies. I mean, it's about $125, but I do know that the ATR 2100 is about $70, but it doesn't have the volume control. Excuse me. It doesn't have the volume control. It doesn't have the ability for you to turn the volume up too much. Or the gain, I guess that would be the output going into what you're hearing right now. So, it doesn't have that, but it's still a great microphone. And you can use it for USB, and you can use it for like a mixing board as well. So getting that microphone and getting a good set of headphones is always good. But with what you were talking about, Andy, you can also find headsets that have the microphone that way. And there's some really good ones out there that you can find as well. I've just recently become a little more, I've kind of been like, okay, I need to be a little more lax about the equipment that I'm using, because I come from such a traditional radio background that it's cool if you use those headset microphones that you would see sportscasters using. Right. So you could use those as well.
Yeah. And how you mentioned the mixing board. I'm so lazy, everybody. I'm not doing a mixing board. Maybe if I had a team, but I know
Right.
it's important, and I see you always buffing up your content using your
Yeah.
mixing board. Talk about that.
Yeah. I prefer to have a mixing board. I prefer, I would say you don't necessarily have to have a mixing board, but I use one because it gives me great equalization on the output of my microphone. And so it gives me a deep and a rich sound that I can get. And then a lot of the times, whenever I am recording a podcast through my mixing board, I'm still doing some post processing to that.
Yeah.
So, if you want to get super technical, which is probably for a way other time, that's what I'm doing. So, any video that you've ever heard on my YouTube channel, it would actually sound a lot more flat. It would sound more like this microphone, but I do a
Right.
little bit of post processing. So when you hear it, it sounds a little more processed, and it wasn't done through a mixing board. So there are ways around that. You don't necessarily have to have a mixing board, but if you're conducting an interview that is maybe like this, it's USB, it needs to be done through Skype, it needs to be done through YouTube somehow.
Well,
You would probably need a mixing board, but this works just fine as well.
I keep it really simple, folks. I interview people on Zoom. I probably duct tape my podcast together for some people looking at it, but I interview folks on Zoom because it's so easy for them to get there. And I just do audio only so we get good quality. And then I download the audio, but now I'm stuck because my editing platform is Audacity because it's free.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten really good friends with Audacity, but I have to go another step and learn how to download some FMMG, blah, 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 so that I can take the Zoom recording and turn it into an MP3 so that I can go into Audacity. Right now, I use this online converter
Right.
thingamajiggy. Honest to goodness, it's on the cheap. This is why I want to talk to folks. You can do this on a shoestring budget. And so, and then I pop it in, I edit it, I put my intros and my outros onto the, and I take out anything that might be extra, that sirens going by, we drop something. I mean, one time I had a guest, honest to God, we could not remember the name of the movie Forrest Gump. We laughed for like 5 minutes. And I was so happy he was only 35. And so, but so I wanted to pull that out, but the audience doesn't need
Right.
to listen to us having a giggle fest. We had
Right.
a good time. It could be in an outtake. But so I do that. And then I also, thanks to Dr. I, who turned me onto this, she's the podcaster and live streamer of Classroom Without Walls. She turned me on to otter.ai, and I'll put that into the notes as well, which is free notes transcription. Now, is it any good? I mean, is it ideal? No. But you get the gist of what happened during your conversation, and you can pull out once again, oh, that'll make a great audiogram. Oh, that's a great quote that I could have in my show notes. And I just think it's helpful for me personally, instead of listening to the show and typing up, etc.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
I have no problem with that. In fact, I'm not sure if you knew, but I am one of the co-producers to Guy Kawasaki's new podcast called Remarkable People. And so I have been editing his podcast. He uses Descript. And so we use Descript on my good friend Jeff C. I think you know Jeff.
Yes.
Jeff C. He helps with that podcast, and so he does a lot of the stuff in Descript, and you're able to go in and really kind of dig deep and edit the podcast, and you can move pieces of the transcript into different areas, and
it takes the audio with it, right?
Takes the audio with it, yeah. So Descript is a great way of doing it. The only thing, if you're, I don't know, a audio snob like me, it doesn't make the cuts as clean as I would like to. I like my conversations to sound very, very natural and free flowing, versus you hear it cut. So it's an imperfect software, but it is useful. I will say it's a very useful software. And if you have someone like me who's using Adobe Audition, you're just saving yourself. You're cutting yourself time. Spending, from being spent in the audio editing software. So you could use Descript as well. Descript would do
I have to ask Vicky a quick question. Vicky, Wondershare as in Filmora for audio, you can also do the audio, not just video in that? just asking that quick question?
Sure.
Because
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
curious too. Folks, I'm learning here as well as you. But yeah, I keep wanting to bring in how you can do it on the cheap
Yeah.
because podcasting is just such a wonderful and delicious way to connect with your audience. We have a great question from a local gal here in Boston, Rachel O'Neill, who is so about human connection and hugging in real life, hurling. Great to see you, Rachel. Mwah, mwah, mwah. We miss everybody from our hometown. But this is a great question. If you do an interview podcast, how do you coach guests to have a sufficient headset microphone set up? Oh my gosh, it's the bane of our existence.
I personally, I've gotten rid of that idea of trying to coach someone from using the onboard microphone on the computer. I specifically, and the reason why I do this, I specifically just do phone call interviews, because phone calls are they're already normalized. The sound is normalized, and it's a piece of technology that everyone knows how to use. So it makes it easier. And I just tell them, hey, just give me a call. Now, as the podcaster, it's going to take a little bit more of some technical acuity to learn how to do that. I have videos on my YouTube channel on how to do that. But for the most part, I just do them all on the phone. And then I go in and then I just do that processing inside of Adobe Audition. You could do it in Audacity, but I think it might take you a little bit longer.
Yeah. So, and Rachel, Zoom, it really is a tough call. I've had people show up with the fancy microphone, but they have the same problem I do. Pull away, come back. Earbuds sometimes just worked great. And it's also, I always ask the guests to please be in the strongest Wi-Fi location in your home. So again, I interview people using Zoom because I just find there's just no problem with that. Great question. Thanks, Rachel. Miss you. Mwah.
I do know also that if you use, I think it's for Mac, but again, let's just try to keep it on a shoestring budget. But you can use a service called Ecamm. It does cost money, and I do know you can do phone calls through that by using Skype. So, but it's going to cost you money. But if you're trying to do it on a more of a shoestring budget, just do it on Zoom. And again, like Andy, what you said. You just got to coach them through. I mean, not everyone's going to listen and not everyone cares. So, so it's going to be up to you and how you want that to sound or how you want to execute the sound. So, it should never be the responsibility of the guest. It should be your responsibility to get the guest on.
However, that said, if a guest is calling in and they're in a coffee shop, I reschedule.
Yeah. They have to be in a quiet area for the most part.
Out of respect for you, the listener.
Yeah.
Let me just answer Aaron's question here. Otter.ai takes your audio. You upload your audio to Otter, and they transcribe it. So it's great for any kind of content, meetings, etc. In fact, they're transcribing all the conversations and meetings with the World Health Organization and providing them to everybody for free. But I will tell you, it's not perfect. It's not, the best, but you get enough and it's free. So thanks for asking, Aaron.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we have to realize and know about all this technology is that it is not perfect. It will not do the thing that you want it to do. So you have to find a way to do it. And that's why we have developers come up with software like an Otter AI or a Descript. So as more people use it, then it becomes a little more perfect. But that's also it comes with new challenges that content creators will have to face. So it's just really going to be up to the content creator and what their threshold is of what they are looking for. I could never go to you and say like, Andy, you have to do it this way because of you have to do it this way. I can recommend doing it a certain way, but you might have a different workflow.
And you have been very encouraging and kindly so, I might add, for me to up my game. But, there's just some things that I'm great at and some things I'm just going to just let it go. But I also want to get back to the platforms. And the reason you're going to choose is Shannon was talking about places that are to host your podcast is because you want a place that you can quickly just upload, do all the show notes, have it host, and then shoot it out. So I use Spreaker, and it's about $20 a month. And it's a great place to house my archive of podcasts. I can put them on my website, of course, but there's a lot of reasons why I like them. One, that they immediately shoot it out to Apple and Google Podcasts and Stitcher. And then I think I had to reach a certain threshold for them to then shoot it out to Spotify. I think there might be a gate at Spotify for podcasters to actually get on there. And that's great for me. And also, I just love when I share from Spreaker, has a play button. So wherever anybody's sitting, you just hit that play button and it plays right there. You don't have to go back to any other location to hear the podcast. But there's also inexpensive ways, right, Shannon, as well as more expensive ways to host your content.
Right. Yeah. You can use an anchor.fm. It's free hosting. But again, if you're going to do that, I would give you the fair warning that you are going to run into challenges with anchor.fm, and I would not use it as a long-term solution. I would pay for hosting, and the hosting it's not wildly expensive, but we have to also consider the times we're living in right now. Who knows what those services will do in the future? We don't know. But like for you say you're using a Spreaker, which I don't know how much it costs per month.
Yeah, it's $20 for the basic package.
So $20 a month. You could do something like a Libsyn. That's $20 a month. But a new one that I know that is out there is Simplecast. And Simplecast is $15 a month with unlimited podcast uploads. And you get up to a certain amount, and you can create multiple shows as well.
And Simplecast will shoot it off to all the platforms.
Yeah, they'll put it out to all the platforms. So it's just really going to be up to you. It's like saying, am I going to drive a Kia, or am I going to drive a Ford, or am I going to drive a Toyota? You just got to choose the one that's going to fit for you, and that's going to be the one that you'll work with. Everyone has their preferences of why they use different types of hosting. So and different
is key. And I've done the Blueberry.
Oh, Blueberry, yeah. Blueberry, yeah.
Blueberry for WordPress, but I still had to be on SoundCloud.
But you had to what?
I still had to be on SoundCloud.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Use that. So, hey, just want to bring in a friend of ours from the Google Hangout days. Hey, Roy Montero. Great to see you. Hello, Andy. Been a while, huh? Yes. And Shannon, when just starting out, do you recommend a video podcast since that's the future, or audio podcast, or both, and why? Thank you. It's a great question. And I think, Vicky in the thread and other folks definitely throw their podcasts up on YouTube. What are your thoughts?
Yes, but with I would say conditions, because we see that we have, you can upload audio to your hosting provider, say like Spreaker. But I don't recommend just throwing the audio on to YouTube without actual video being played, like without talking heads or something, keeping it kind of Joe Rogan style. Yeah. From what I understand, and I can't be too sure on this, I know I have read it somewhere, but I do know that when you are pushing audio to YouTube and it's just an audio file and it's got a slate card, YouTube looks down upon that. It's a video only platform, so you want to avoid doing that. So instead, what you would want to do is you would want to do what we're doing here. We're recording a video live, and I would throw it up onto YouTube with the audio itself. So I would do it that way. Now, YouTube is its own animal, and I think every podcaster should be doing video and transcribing ripping it and mixing it down into audio, with the intention of knowing that it's going to be both audio and video. The power of YouTube is like I can just tell you that is the number one driver of all of my content. YouTube is the number one. It's because it's tied to Google. It's a long tail platform that allows you to get results way later down the line. So there are ways of how you get that traffic, but I would say yes to answer your question, Roy. Yes, I would definitely turn a video into audio and just have it on YouTube.
Yeah, because we're on StreamYard here, and you can download an audio. And, turn it into a podcast. I've done that many times from a YouTube video that I created. All right. So Aaron is getting fancy schmancy talking about metadata. Now I've heard this floating around, but I don't know what it means. Aaron says, I'm interested to learn about metadata and how that plays a part in producing podcasts.
Right. So there's different types of metadata that you would be using in podcasts. The audio file itself has metadata itself. For podcasting purposes, it's not wildly crucial, at least not anymore, just because a lot of the metadata that you are adding, and if we don't know what metadata is that information that you see, like say whenever you are on a Facebook post and you see the title of the article, and then you see the description of the article, and you see the image that is there. That's all the metadata and the SEO, the search engine optimization information metadata that you have there. So when it comes down to podcasting, podcasting is going to have different styles of metadata that you're going to use. You may have keywords that are going to be going in there. But I think what is the most important thing here is the title of your podcast and the description of your podcast. You could call it the show notes.
Okay. So I know. All right. So yeah. So when I put pesky detail, but when I put my show notes onto my WordPress site, it's always asking me for my metadata so that I have a little tag when it with the title. Is that what that means?
So your metadata on your WordPress site is going to be, it's something that's going on the actual web that Google is going to crawl. Yeah. So when someone does a search, they are searching specific keywords. You want that particular blog post to be titled to be searchable for Google. So if your title is 5 ways to create a pitch deck for startup owners, that would be the title of your blog post. Yeah. So that would be something that is searchable, more searchable inside of Google. And then how I have always done it is I've always taken that same exact title and I've somehow incorporated it into my body of my text somehow. And that's how I do that. And then as far as the body, as far as metadata on your website, what I would do is I would transcribe the entire podcast as speakers. You know, it would be a conversation between speakers, and you can do that with I do know with rev.com you could do that, right? And you put all of that up on your website. Now people could ask, they say, well, I'm not going to read an entire podcast, and that's completely fine. What you want to do is you want to drive people to go look at the podcast on your website so you can drive traffic onto the website, have enough information there that they're staying on the web page long enough to index that page and make it a lot more searchable inside of Google. Now, taking it on the other side where it's just audio specific, because you're going to want to look at audio specific metadata. Each platform is different, but what you're looking for mainly are just the keywords you want. I would say your description of your metadata for your podcast show itself, like the individual show that you would be posting, you would want to make it more like, maybe 200 words. Because when we consume the content, none of us are looking at 1,000-word post inside of Apple Podcasts, Spotify. So you want to make it look like as if it was like an expanded version of Netflix show descriptions is what it would be, right? Okay. So you would want that. And then of course you would want to title it the way you would need to title it. You don't need to put like episode 01 or anything like that, because most of the hosting platforms allow you that opportunity to put to title the name of the episode within the platform itself. So when it comes to metadata, you have to fill out almost every little detail that they're asking for in order for your podcast to be indexed on the audio platforms, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, all of that.
All right. Well, I feel like I've gone to school here. Thank you on that. Because that, that leads into the whole, how do you get more followers for your podcast? How do you build that? Well, you've got to do that knowing what metadata is and other marketing techniques. How does a host gain a following? How do you get past those 4 people who listen to your podcast every week?
Well, you're always going to have, no, I'm just kidding. You won't always have 4 people. But what I think it boils down to is the value that you provide that you will end up getting in return. So you're going to give the value. You have to make sure that the value is there. As we look at podcasts, and depending on what type of podcast that you're creating, we have to look at it from the perspective of, let's say, an entertainment podcast versus an education podcast.
Yep.
And so both go hand in hand, both work side by side. You can do both, right? But when we look at, say, comedy podcasts, those are typically titled out something silly. They're not too super SEO friendly, right? They're not
Right.
very friendly, but they have a description that is there. And for example, I have some friends. They have a podcast called Small Town Murder. It's just a true crime comedy podcast, is all it is.
Right.
It's
True,
yeah, true
true
crime comedy
crime,
podcast. Very vulgar. I mean,
as one does.
yeah, yeah. But you're talking about a pair of guys who just stayed with a consistent schedule,
Yeah.
created a podcast, and they went from recording a podcast in their apartment in one of the worst parts of Phoenix to now the guy lives over here by me in this gigantic house, and they're making a bunch of money right now off their podcast because they maintained consistency and they made the connections. Now, how do we get people to start listening to our podcast? Well, I think every business owner or every startup, if they haven't done so already, they have to start building an email list from the start, or some form of email list, some form of following somewhere. Right? We can use social media all day long, but you want to make sure that you are capturing them in some way or shape or form by having them on an email list, so that when you do drop a brand new episode, you can shoot an email out to them and say like, hey, a brand new episode is coming out. Because not everyone is going to hit the subscribe button. Not everyone is going to pay attention to the phone itself. So what you're trying to do is you're always trying to drive traffic back to the podcast, and then do it inversely. You're trying to drive people to get on the email list. So you would do that through social media means, and you would also do that through email marketing, word of mouth, whatever. Now, let me take this a little bit further. The value of your podcast is what's going to be important. All right. So if you're a startup owner, what is the value proposition that you're going to give every single week? How are you going to help your audience? What are you doing to assist them? How are you going to be of service to your audience? That is the key right there. If you look at my YouTube channel, every single video, probably maybe with the exception of maybe 3 or 4, but every single video is a how to, what do I do? Should I question? Because those are questions that are being asked inside of a Google search or a YouTube search. And so in order for me to get in front of those people organically, I start titling my titles based on the suggestions that are given to you when you type into the Google search bar. You type in, should I have my startup? And then it should autocomplete. That's where I would get my ideas from.
Got it. Oh my gosh. That's a lot to take in, but it's important, especially being reliable and consistent and providing your content. I mean, if it's going to be once a week, do it once a week, once a month, but just stay consistent all the time. And Shannon is absolutely right in getting an email list or some form. I use Meetup, but some form where people are knowing where they're going to find you and find your content consistently. So another great question from Aaron here, which is, any tips on how to interest guests on coming onto a new podcast if you're an unknown host?
Yeah, I would
Great
start
question.
honestly with your first 10 episodes. I would start with doing it solo. I would do it solo, and I would make sure that you get some people that start listening to it. That way you have a little bit more clout to go and reach out to someone and say, I am looking for a guest to come on my show, right? There is an individual, his name is Mark Shaw. You write his name down. Mark Shaw has a specific community that is dedicated all to finding people who are looking to be on podcasts. So Mark is an excellent resource. I'm a part of his email list. I've never been on any of the shows, but I recommend that because he's got a large community that are always looking for people who either want to be on a podcast or looking for people who are looking for guests.
And the Lucky Titans, same thing. They're all about being guests on each other's show and really helping get that listenership up as well. That's with Josh Tapp. But, Aaron, I happen to be a guest interview podcast host. That's how I roll. And I find that people are actually kind of excited to be on a show. Yeah. And for me, it's just deciding who's going to be the most relevant person for my audience and what they need to hear. And also, sprinkling it in with some luminaries. A lot of folks like to go right to all the luminaries that are out there. And that, I want everyday people on my podcast, every once in a while getting somebody who had a unicorn as a founder or a big investor, but mostly, bringing on a guest and the theory out there, and I think it's true, Shannon, is that a lot of times you may not be able to get somebody on the phone just to say hi or talk to them about something, but then you invite them onto your podcast and like, oh yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
then after you've been consistent for a while, you're turning people away.
Yeah, and then that's the truth. I mean, you can go out and you can reach out. I would say reach out to people who are more relevant to what you would be talking about. If they can't make that podcast, great, that's fine. Move on to the next one. You're going to get, some people who will turn you down, but not everyone will turn you down. It's just a matter of the scheduling. You have to figure out the schedule and
Right.
coordinate the schedule. And most people love to be on podcasts. It's a new form of radio. It's like doing a talk radio, basically, is all it is.
Really is. I'm curious, Aaron, about your because you've got a great voice for podcast, Aaron, and so I think you're a thoughtful person, and I think in your industry you could have some really great content, just so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So Shannon, so now we've talked about the mic, the hosting platforms, SEO, things like that, how to get followers. How important are downloads and listens? Because a lot of people get really uptight about this. By being on Spreaker and on Lips, and folks are on Lips and the same thing, they make sure none of the bots get out there. Because a lot of times, if you're on some of these free services, bots jump on and you're like, oh, I got 1,000 downloads. Well, out of those 1,000, maybe 20 are real.
Right.
It's really important.
Yeah, I would say downloads are pretty significant. You should have some idea of how many people are downloading your podcast. There are statistics and analytics that you can look at inside of Apple Podcasts, inside of Spotify, whatever hosting platform that you, or not, I wouldn't say hosting platform, syndication platform that you are putting your podcast on. They will give you particular analytics like time spent listening, TSL. And so when you learn about that TSL, you can say like, oh, I've got people who are listening to this podcast, and I can leverage that and use those numbers. And of course, way later down the line, maybe we have another discussion on advertising and sponsorships. Right now probably isn't the best time just because of where we are in the world today, but you can use those downloads as leverage. But downloads also serve as another purpose of saying, okay, if I'm getting more downloads, this means more people are talking about my podcast and more people are sharing my podcast. Right. So it's more of the grassroots virality of it all. So you can get more people there. And again, if we were to go back to the very first question of like, why should a startup founder, solopreneur do this? Well, I mean, I think any person who is in business wants more business and wants more people to get, have eyes on the product or this business or service. I mean, downloads are pretty good. I mean, you should always be striving to be as excellent as you can be while trying to maintain your sanity too.
That's right. Because marketing, podcast marketing, digital marketing, and anything, as you know, it can be a little challenging.
Right.
And getting people to take time out of their day to listen is key. My co-host with Founders Live Boston, Andy Jack, has a great comment right here from his wonderful business Synergy Consulting. Check them out, everybody. What are ways to stand out from the crowd if you're doing a podcast in a crowded market?
Yeah, this is a question that I get quite a bit. And no, it sounds kind of like it's going to be the answer that you constantly hear, but I'll give you my quick reasoning. The best way to stand out is just to be yourself, honestly, just to be who you are. The reason for this, and I explain this to my students who take my training courses, I explain this to them and I say, look, when you are in a crowded market, think about whether or not if you went to college. And I remember when I was going to college, I had a religions course that I had taken the first time around. I took Religions 101, and I had this amazing instructor who she was really, really good at what she did. And I should have really paid attention in college with her training or with her course, but I didn't. And I was lazy, and I just didn't think it was all that interesting for my age at 19 years old. And I ended up getting a D in the training or in the course. And so I was like, oh gosh. So I had to take the course again. And so when you're searching for those instructors, when you go into the course catalog, I was looking for her, but she was not in the course catalog. Instead, I had to take the course with another guy. And when I took the course with the other guy, he was completely dry. He was completely boring. It just did not, it was like, it was like a relationship that I knew I shouldn't have been in, and I should have paid attention the first time. So when we look at that and we talk about, well, how do I stand out from a crowded market? You be yourself and you add the value that other podcasters in the market are not giving. Give your own spin on how you execute, how you implement, whatever it may be, because even though maybe your implementation may be similar, there might be something that is just a little bit different. Think about Coke and Pepsi. Some people say Coke and Pepsi they taste somewhat the same with a little bit of a different taste. That might be true. They're the same color, but they have obviously a different taste to themselves. So they're both the same. They're soda.
I'll bring in Seth. Yeah, I'll bring in Seth Godin, Shannon, which is sure it's been done before, but not by you,
not by you,
and not for us. So the best way to differentiate yourself is exactly what Shannon said: be you, brand you, and bring your gifts to the world. Vicki, I just want to bring up one more question that she had. Oops, hold on. This is great. Scheduling. Set a schedule for publishing and stick to it so people know when a new episode is released, and scheduling coordination. So, I know some people use a form, Shannon, for their guests to fill out to come on board, and they choose the time. I want to have a little more control. I tend to just do my podcast on Mondays, preferably at 11. But if I'm interviewing someone on the West Coast or in your time zone, I'll do it at 1.
Right.
But I'll make a special exception for a luminary, of course, but I'll still try to get them in for my schedule.
Right. If you wanted to take it to the next level and you say you wanted to release the podcast, the individual podcast on a Monday at 8 a.m., but your recording schedule might be different. It might be throughout the week. You might be recording throughout the week. I know podcasters who are, I guess I could call them podcasters on steroids. They are recording 4 or 5 interviews in a day, and that gives them the opportunity to crank out a podcast a week for a month or 2. So it's really going to be dependent on what your threshold is going to be, your personal threshold maybe. It's just going to be up to you on how you want to execute on that. So if you're just starting, though, with a podcast, I would say, get your sea legs first, learn about your microphone, learn about the hosting. A big tip I would say before anything is that don't buy your hosting immediately. Wait to buy your hosting, because you would just end up spending money if you don't have the episodes ready to go. So record the episodes first and then go buy the hosting, so that you're not spending $20, $15 a month on hosting that's just sitting there and you've done nothing with it.
Right. And that brings me to my point about being consistent yet again. I know that from what I've read, Shannon, that the threshold seems to be 8 episodes when people go,
yeah.
What are your thoughts around that? How can people keep going?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that you would have to figure out what your objective is. What is your full objective? I know that in the beginning that when you're not getting a whole lot of listeners in the beginning, it's like 8 episodes and you're getting like the same 12 listeners. That's fine. I would still, I would do my best efforts. And I just did a video on this on my YouTube channel. I would do my best to show up on other people's podcasts, because people will love you when they learn more about you on other people's podcasts, other people's YouTube lives, anything else, guest blogging. They learn about you. And if they like you and your style, then they're going to come over and they'll be like, I like that guy. Does he have a podcast? Does he have something that I can chew on even more? I loved his personality. I loved his thoughts. I loved his ideas that he has given. So that's just one way to get out there and get people to learn more about you.
I love that.
Well, and let me finish that up. To get beyond the 8 episodes, that's real good motivation, because then it makes you want to create more podcasts.
Perfect. Yeah. It's great as once you get into the rhythm, it just starts happening and sort of snowballing or something like that. So it's great to be able to be consistent. But I'd like to go over some of the systems and procedures for successful podcasts, because I'm one that likes to have my invite email, which is where I'm going to give, introduce myself, tell them what the podcast is about, how long, how is it carried, what are the expectations, how is it recorded, etc., and what you're going to do to help promote it as well. I like to have once they've confirmed, send them an email that says, I'm so excited to interview you on this date at this time. Here's what we're going to be talking about. I like to make it as easy as possible for my guest, give them a little framework for them to, for us to have a great and delicious conversation with. And then I have these are all templates that I populate, but I also like to have a thank you note, which is when I get to send them all my the archive links, give them maybe a pre-populated post that they could share if they were so inclined, but to thank them for coming. What are some other ideas for systems and procedures to make it a great experience, not just for you and your listeners, but for your guests who are coming on?
You covered basically all of those. I mean, I think everyone's systems and procedures are going to be different. If you're wildly organized and you need to have a system of how things are sent out as far as invites are concerned or thank you emails, I would say follow like your systems and procedures. Typically my systems of procedures are like, they're very similar to yours. I would say like I'm sending an invite. I just tell them what the podcast is all about and when we're going to be doing it, and just to expect a certain amount of time that we will be talking. We may talk for 30 minutes, but it ends up being an hour, and it's just, it depends, and it depends on how much I can get them to open up and get more content. I love to get more content. So more content I get to have, the more content I get to publish. So,
and again, those who are watching now and later, content is so important. Share why.
Yeah, I mean, content can be repurposed. It could be shared out in multiple different forms, and it's all a straight discovery, unless there's something else that I might be missing. But content is just going to be the thing that is going to leverage you over the other people. You could say, one person talks about podcasting. There's plenty of other podcast coaches out there that talk about podcasting, but none of them do it like me, and none of them have content like I do. Right. So it's really the content that's what people love to chew on. And we are in the middle right now of this pandemic, and more people are staying home than ever. I mean, they're just home and they're looking for stuff to chew on right now.
That's why TikTok is doing really well.
Yeah.
But, still creating the content now to prepare for when we get back in the game again too. It's really important, and it really keeps your skill set up. And again, the thing I just love about podcasting is it increases brand awareness. You get to meet many more people, and many more people get to be exposed to you as well. Are there any top mistakes that you'd like to tell us about that you see podcasters make?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned one of them was the ums and uhs. This is a big, I don't know. I would say if this was its own epidemic, it is, because most podcasters feel the ums and uhs need to be edited out. And that's just not true. It's not true. You don't have to have those edited out. Now, do I edit some of them out? Yeah, I'll edit some of them out, but I'm not editing every single one of them out, just because, and the reason for this is because it will take you far too much time to take out every single one of those. Now, you could use the service like Descript and find them and then edit them out, but then it's just going to chop it up and make your podcast sound very choppy. So I would say stay away from that. And I would say the biggest mistake right now I think that people are making is that they're starting with, because we're talking about shoestring budget, if you're wanting to take it to the next level, I would say you need to invest in the proper equipment, and proper equipment doesn't mean necessarily you have to get a mixing board, but it does mean that if you want it to sound better and you want it to sound legit, just get a Blue Yeti microphone. It's just going to make all the difference in the world, and learn how to edit your podcast. That's the biggest one.
Absolutely. And Audacity is for free, and you can just hop on YouTube and say, I need help with fill in the blank. And there's somebody that's going to give you a great training on every aspect of Audacity. So we talked about some great, podcasting marketing tips, because, niching down is great. The SEO topics. Shannon, I struggle with topics. I get done and I go, what do I want to, what am I going to call this? I can't do another how or why or.
Yeah, I mean, lists are always good too. 6 ways to find clarity in your life during your quarantine, that could be one. I would just start looking at magazine titles, because what we have to remember, I think, also is that when we make content, I think a lot of us just make it and we think it's just one and done, because when we do put it up on Google or our website or YouTube, that it's going to get that traffic and it'll be recurring, it'll be recurring over and over and over, and people keep revisiting it. But how can you say it in a different way? Because even though that may be a not so popular video, podcast, blog, how can you rephrase, or how can you come at it from a different angle and refer back to the original post? So if you can do that, that would be great. Coming up with different topic ideas. I try to keep in mind and follow the news of the niche itself. I try to follow the news and say, like, okay, well, what did this person talk about? And I'll read the article, and then something usually within the article is like a topic that probably can be expanded upon a lot more. And so then I'll just go ahead and phrase my titles that way, and then just come up with like 4 different ways. I typically do 3 things, 3 ways to do something. It's always 3, because most people don't go beyond 4 or 5. You give them 3 different ways. And then if you want to expand on it, if you had 10 ways, just say 3 ways you wanted to edit a podcast more efficiently. Just here's 3 ways. And then your next blog post could be 3 more ways to be more efficient,
That's great. I'm going to be putting links into the show notes here. So whether you watch on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, you'll have to run over to YouTube or Facebook to see all the links, because Shannon has some tremendously helpful documents that you're going to want to download. He has a phenomenal Shannon's podcast to do checklist. You definitely want to get that. Shannon's Quick Start Guide to Podcasting, phenomenal. You're going to want to subscribe to him everywhere he glows. How has podcasting enhanced your life and what you're doing in the world, Shannon?
It has allowed me to. It's opened up opportunities, actually. I'm actually over here looking at the comments with April, and she asked that question. I struggle with a lot with ums. Do you have any exercises to help? When it comes down to
Hi, April.
eliminating that vocabulary or those filler words, it's just practice, and everything takes practice. There's no magic pill. Don't believe anyone that says like, oh, there's a specific way you could do this. A lot of this is practice, and you have to think about the first time you ever rode a bike. I mean, you may have struggled, and you may have wobbled, and you may have fallen a couple of times, but after a while, you just got used to it. And that's how it's been for me in the radio industry. It's allowed me to hone my presentation skills, but podcasting has also awarded me opportunities to teach people and give them more knowledge on how they can expand upon their own podcast. It's allowed me to learn more about search engine optimization. It's taught me how to learn about ad spends on YouTube advertising. It's allowed me so much. It's allowed me to connect with the right people. If I had never met Jeff C. all those years on Google Plus, I would not be editing Guy Kawasaki's podcast to this day. So you open up so many different opportunities that you just have no idea.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I want to bring up a comment from one of my favorite folks out here in the Boston area, Seymour. How do you have this live broadcasted branded? So this is StreamYard, Seymour. So I am live. Shannon and I are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Periscope, and Twitch right now. And someday I'll be approved to do live on LinkedIn. So that would be great as well.
But, one of these days when we all get approved, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the banner I can put in, and I can change, because I also host the Founders Live. So I changed all the branding for that and the colors. But you put in these really cool banners. You just type it in and around it goes. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful platform. It's a great group of people. And it's a startup out of Vancouver. They just got out of beta.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Last November. So, cool. And Roy was part of StreamYard from the beginning. So we've all been playing on it for a little over a year. Mm-hmm. I've been meaning to play on it, but then I finally decided, of course, because thank you to the virus, decided to go live again. It's been quite a few years. And I also want to bring up, April, you mentioned something about on titles. I love this. Plus, it's fun to play Siskel and Ebert.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean
I love that.
that's a good way of doing it, to have a discussion, a roundtable discussion about something. I recommend to all my podcasters that they do something that is very similar to that, and then transcribe it into a blog post, put it into a blog post, and
I
that.
think it's great. Like Charlie Rose
Yeah,
back
that's
in the day.
all you do. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, you can always have opposing viewpoints
Yeah.
and really get some great lively discussions going with topics that are a little more granular.
Yeah. Well, Shannon, I got to thank you for helping us go deep because we really covered a lot of territory. We've been at this for over an hour. It's a lot to take in,
Mhm.
folks who are watching this in the evergreen content, but it's so important. I want you to know that you can reach out to Shannon and me anytime. Just shoot us a question either at our emails or on social or here in the comments, wherever you've watched this video. We would be delighted to help you out with this. And I mentioned several of Shannon's wonderful documents to help folks downloads, and I'll have all of those in the show notes. But Shannon, how can we open doors and add wind to your sales for the work you do in the world?
Yeah, share my YouTube channel out, share my guides out. They're there to help you out. They're there to get you, off of the launch pad. If you're just sitting there and you are just kind of wondering if you should do this thing, those things are all meant to help you out. So feel free to share my name and all my assets to your friends if they are looking to start a podcast.
Yay! And viewers and audience, I am beyond grateful that you tuned in and that you shared your deliciousness on this inaugural live show voyage I did tonight with my dear friend Shannon Hernandez. I'm grateful for your time. And as I said, if you're watching this at a later date, please reach out to us with any questions or comments. We're here to help you. To receive an alert whenever I post a new live show, please join my Meetup group. Just go into Meetup and search Startup Life Live. And that way you'll get alerted every time I have a new show. Next week, next Tuesday night at 7, I'm having Melinda Gagnon on. She is a angel investor, venture capital firm that she has, Uprise, and former Google employee. She really understands tech, digital content, and we're going to be talking about life as founders right now. And we're going to answer questions about how do you stay afloat? What happens if you have to put your business on pause? How can you get financed right now, raise capital right now? How do you have tough conversations with investors? It's all going to be Tuesday, April 7th, right here in Startup Life Live on April 7th at 7 p.m. Okay.
I'm writing that
Also,
down.
oh, good. She's amazing. She's a local goddess, but she's just such a terrific and empathetic human being for startups. I also want to remind everybody, please subscribe to my newsletter. Let's Stick Together. It pops up when you land on my website, andylyons.com, because it takes a village to raise a business. And once a month, I send out what's going on in my podcast, what's happening here, where I've been in the world, which of course will be only virtual, but also some content that will really help you in your business or answer some questions that you may have or give you some inspiration and motivation. And for those of you who are suffering through this period of time, please do not suffer alone. You know that I am the urgent care startup founder coach. I charge by the minute. Make an emergency call with me. My offer to those on the Startup Live Life Live community is $1 a minute. So 15 minutes, we can have you shifted. 30 minutes, we can have you shifted. Call me. We'll find a time on the calendar. Let's get you through this time that you're going through. Even if all of a sudden you're scaling faster than you thought, you do not need to suffer alone. And I have this gift to quickly discern who a founder is, who their business, what their business model is, and how those two work together. And it doesn't take me but minutes to know who you are, why you are, how you be, and what's up with your business. So reach out to me, okay? And Shannon, I am so grateful. Here's my virtual hug.
Oh, here you go. There you go.
It's great. And Aaron, thank you so much. My dear friend Aaron here. So glad you're back in the saddle. Yeah, it feels good to be live again.
Yeah,
And
just like the old days, Andy.
I know. That's what
Just
Nikki
like the
Pasquier was saying too,
Mhm.
because that's how I met her. And Seymour has a phenomenal new business. It's called Roland. It's auto repair on demand.
Oh,
So
yeah,
yeah,
that's huge.
your car is broken down on the side street.
Yeah.
His business will, you just call, you got the app on your phone, you go help, and he sends a qualified person to you instead of you trying to get onto the books.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that cool?
That's
Thank
cool.
you, Seymour, for showing up. Thank you, April. Again, great to see everybody. Great to see you, Roy. And any last thoughts, Shannon, before we say goodbye?
No, I would. Well, I mean, the last thing I would say is just to stay healthy, stay clean, and wash your hands, and don't forget to add value and impact the world with the person that you are.
Oh, beautiful words. Couldn't say it any better. And of course, stay focused, stay strong, and remember that you've got this. Cheers, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.